players gather to cast powerful spells, some of the oldest and most powerful in the history of Magic the Gathering. Urza's Tower, Urza's Plant, Urza's Mine, and I guess Blood Moon. Battling head-to-head in brutal combat, they all have one thing in common: to uphold their legacy and the search for eternal glory.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind BoshNRoll on YouTube, Thraben University, and theepicstorm.com. This episode is sponsored by 3-for-1 Trading and Sparks Law Practice.
Hello, and welcome to episode 125 of the Eternal Glory podcast, Modern Horizons 3 Spoilers. We've already recorded 30 minutes of introductions and banter for the week, available in our supporter-exclusive pre-show. Check out patreon.com/eternalglory to gain access or join as a YouTube member for the same content on YouTube instead. As always, I'm Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU.
I am Brian Coval, aka BoshNRoll.
And I am Brian Cook of the Epic Storm.
Shout out to our new Patreon members and YouTube members since the last episode. We've got Robo Ragan, Jared, JB, Eternal Durdles, shout out to Eternal Durdles Pod, friends of the show, Zach C, Neuropoi, and Chadwick N. Lots of new subscribers since the last one. Shout out to all of you. That is patreon.com/eternalglory to get that and the extra content every episode.
There's some good rants in the pre-show this week.
Yeah, it started out fun and then we got mad. If you like enragement clicks, you should join the Patreon this week.
Now, this episode is brought to you by Sparks Law, a business transactional law firm owned by Eternal Magic community member Jonathan Sparks. If you're an entrepreneur, business owner, or gig worker looking to start your own company, Sparks Law can help you with partnership agreements, contract reviews, intellectual property protection, or any other business legal questions. If you want to shape your business strategy with a fellow Eternal gamer, reach out via email to jsparks, that's JSPARKS, at sparkslawpractice.com, or call 470-268-5234. 3-for-1 Trading is one of Europe's leading Magic the Gathering traders. Their online shop has a fantastic selection of high-end Magic cards, especially for vintage, legacy, and old school players. You can find them at shop.3for1trading.com or visit their booth at major events. They run weekly sales, and new, individually scanned high-end cards are added every Wednesday. Use code ETERNALGLORY to gain our community-exclusive offer of free worldwide shipping on your first order over $500 and experience their world-class customer service and exact grading for yourself.
And if you want to advertise to over 10,000 Eternal gamers every single episode, reach out to us. We're always accepting new sponsors with Phil's ghost voice.
Ooh.
Oh, spooky.
Before we get going with the main show here, we have a question from one of our companion tier supporters. So this is from Dragon Day Dragon. Is there a time or day of week that it is best to play Vintage on MTGO? I find that my queue is always 10 plus minutes whenever I try to play, or is that just the nature of Vintage on Magic Online?
There are times where that is just the state of things. I personally have been pretty successful finding matches in under 5 minutes. Sometimes they fire up immediately. I've been firing off Vintage queues like crazy, practicing for NYSE, and the only time I really felt like I was waiting a long time recently was this past Sunday, where I tried to play Vintage League during the Sunday Vintage Challenge, and I imagine just a lot of the population was already busy. But I've mostly found it okay, and I play like during the day East Coast time. But I know Europe and Japan both have a lot of MTGO Vintage grinders too, so I feel like any time of day there should be some people in there, but sometimes you do just get caught and have to wait a while.
All right. With that, we're going to be talking about Modern Horizons 3 today. And there is a lot of stuff that is going to be eternally playable. Like, there's a lot of constructed staples here. But to start things off, we just want to make a brief nod to existing cards that are being brought to Modern for the first time. So, you've got the Medallion Cycle, Orum's Chant, Meltdown, Phyrexian Tower, Buried Alive, Cephalid Coliseum, Barbarian Ring, Wirewood Symbiote, Worn Power Stone, Deserted Temple, Kappa Cannoneer, Sylvan Safekeeper, Priest of Titania, Lilia the Blade Reforged.
I want to do a props and slops real quick. I have original foils of basically all of these cards, and stonks, baby. Welcome to Modern. The slop, though, is to Meltdown. I don't know if you guys saw this, but they gave Meltdown a retro frame printing, which is using the same art as Urza Saga, which is already a retro frame set just organically. And as best I could figure, they did this so a old border foil Meltdown could exist. But I personally feel like if you're going to retro frame cards that are already retro frame, you're actually just making the whole thing less cool. I don't know. I think that sucks.
No big argument here.
Fuck retro frame Meltdown. Yep. It's cool that Meltdown's in Modern, though. Urza Saga. More checks for Urza Saga. Always welcome in formats where that card's legal.
Yeah, I don't want to dive too deep in because it's not the focus of the episode, but like some of these cards are very genuinely exciting. You know, like more life into an elf deck. Lilia has combo potential and just fair beatdown potential. Wirewood Symbiote, great for elf decks. You have really good lands available. Orum's Chant is a cool protection spell.
Phyrexian Tower is going right into Golgari Yawgmoth. Like, that's going to be a day one playable card.
Yeah. Yawgmoth and Scam are already top 5 decks in Modern, and sometimes they're 2 of the top 3 decks in Modern, and Tower just goes right into both of those. So that's a big one right off the bat. This is cool stuff. But we're not really here to talk about Modern. Are we ready to talk about the new cards?
Wait, from Modern Horizons 3?
I know, it's weird, but turns out this is a Legacy podcast primarily. But we are going to talk about these cards through the lens of Vintage, CEDH. Some of them are in Pauper. Anything that doesn't rotate is within the purview of this podcast as far as we're concerned. But Legacy is always primary.
Well, Brian, I'm not going to say what it is yet, but I think the first card is a huge design mistake.
Oh. Ooh.
Yeah. Let me read it. Here we go. We're going in. This is Vexing Bauble. 1 colorless mana artifact. Whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. 1 colorless tap. Sacrifice Vexing Bauble, draw a card. So this is basically, I mean, I don't want to say it's Chalice on Zero. This is Lavinia. This is a 1 mana Lavinia that any deck can play. It is symmetrical, so Lavinia is asymmetrical, so if you play this, you can't force a will at stuff either. But if you want to, you can sack this to draw a card, and then start casting your free spells. And in an environment where maybe you have 4 of these in a deck, I'm thinking of this more for Vintage, but I know, Brian, you play a lot of free spells in Legacy too. But I'm thinking about the era of Chalice of the Void being fully legal, just unrestricted in Vintage, where many games were just decided by, I dump out my Moxen, then I Chalice on Zero, then I pass the turn, and you can't dump out your Moxen. And I just play the game up 3 mana on you. And that can sometimes bite you because maybe you draw some zeros later. But with this card, you could just sack it, draw a card, dump out your zeros, and then play another one and keep your opponent locked out. I could see the potential for this being miserable, but I think it does apply pressure to people like the Bryant Cooks of the world. And I think the honest application in the Modern setting, where this just gives any deck a way on the play to slow down Scam, or Rhinos, or all of these busted decks that are in the format, I think where this was designed for, which is Modern, it's pretty reasonable. But I could see it being an asshole in Legacy and really in Vintage.
Did we mention the fact that just any Urza Saga deck effectively has 4 tutorable copies of these that they can fish out at any given time? Because it feels like that is pretty fucking important.
Yeah. Just as we talk through all cards, just remember 0 or 1 mana artifacts.
Bryant is turning bright red. There is a rant coming. He is a tomato.
Phil, clear the floor. Let him go. Let him cook.
It just makes me so angry. Okay, so we have Survival of the Fittest, a card that is banned because they made the statement that if they didn't want to have to think about it every time they printed a creature. Okay? Then we have Urza Saga, which we all know and love. It's a terrific Magic card, but they keep on printing stupid 1 mana artifacts like Lava Spur Boots and now Vexing Bauble. It's like they don't even think about Urza Saga when they're printing cards for the Modern format that happens to affect all other formats where those cards are legal, like Legacy and Vintage. Okay? And I feel like Vexing Bauble is a ham-fisted fix for a problem in Modern. They're like, oh, grief is so good. Maybe we should print this card that stops grief. Well, you have to be on the play. What about the 50% of the time you're on the draw and they just go grief ephemerate or some other undying effect, and then grief is back and they just take your 2 best cards and you don't get to play Magic? Like, this is just such a bad fix. Like, I understand that the design team knows more about this game than I do, but I play a lot of Magic, a lot. And I just don't think that this card even fixes the problem that they were looking to solve. So I get that Void Mirror was too expensive because Void Mirror was 2 mana, so they wanted to make it 1 mana. But like Brian said, the fact that this can be sacrificed, you draw a card, you get to play all of your things, and then you get to play another. You could fight it off of Urza's Saga. And I think that the play pattern in Vintage is going to be so miserable that they're going to have to restrict this. And just the fact that any Urza Saga deck can still find it, because they don't want to restrict Urza Saga in Vintage. There's talks about it, but no matter what, you're always going to have 1 copy to find off of your Saga. And I think that this card just created a problem for a very, very long time. And I get that it's symmetrical, and I expect a lot of people to forget that when they're casting Force of Wills, but I hate the design of this card. I just don't think it actually solves anything, but it's creating a lot of problems.
So I agree with a lot of what you said. I'm going to push back in 2 spots. The first is grief is only one of the things this stops. Among the top decks of Modern, you get Court of Calling, Crashing Footfalls, Living End, Summoner's Pact. There's just a bunch of things that don't cost mana across the whole top frame of Modern where this card is impactful other than turn 0. And if you do happen to be on the play versus scam, you get that too. Like, there is a lot going on with this card outside of just a ham-fisted answer to scam that only works half the time. The other place I'm going to push back is, and I think we've talked about this before, have you considered that you're the bad guy?
Oh, I'm definitely the bad guy. But when you look at Modern, the combo decks for the most part are pretty unplayable, unless you happen to think that Rhinos is a combo deck, which I don't. But Modern decks, like, the combo decks there are just so bad.
Yeah, we know you think combo sucks, but that might be part of your definition of combo, because Amulet and Living End are both combo decks in Modern that are both affected by this card. Living End catastrophically, and Amulet, it cuts off half of their routes to Primeval Titan. But, I mean, none of those are Storm decks. They're not spell-based combo.
I agree with you on Living End. Living End is a combo deck. I did forget about that one, but the combo decks that I know and love, you are correct, Brian.
Okay, so those are 2 of the top 5 decks, and Yogg is also a top 5 deck, and they could just, like, spend 1 mana on a Court of Calling, but a lot of the times Yogg lines are, like, creature, 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 Cord tapping all those creatures for the Blood Artist or whatever, then they combo you out. And it actually does constrict Cord a little bit. I don't even know if you'd bring it in versus Yogg, honestly, but I think combo's got a little more juice to it. It's just not Gift Storm like you might want it to be.
True.
But I have good news from you. What if Necropotence was legal in Modern? Is that a combo card?
It is a combo card. It's even a Storm card. However, all of the mana in Modern doesn't make black mana. It's mostly red combo, which is why getting Ruby Medallion is so exciting in that format. I see Necrodominance as more of a Legacy Storm combo.
Let me read this card before you go down.
You just said it was Necropotence. Everybody knows what Necropotence says, Brian.
Sure, it's a little different. So black, 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 legendary enchantment. Skip your draw step. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay any amount of life if you do draw that many cards. Your maximum hand size is 5. If a card or token would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Let me just draw the comparisons and differences to actual Necropotence, a card that is banned in Legacy and restricted in Vintage real quick, and then I'll let Bryant talk about the applications of this. Black, 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 enchantment, the same. This is legendary. I don't know why you'd ever want 2 of these in play, but you can't. So don't. Skip your draw step, that's there. At the beginning of your end step, pay any amount of life if you do draw that many cards. This is different in a few important ways. Necropotence is at any point you can pay 1 life to exile a card, and in your end step, that card is added to your hand. That means you have more control over, like, if it somehow makes sense to pay 2 life now, then see if your opponent, like, I don't know, remembers their Eidolon of the Great Revel trigger And then you could be like, oh, sweet, I got away with that one. I'll pay 2 more life.
It's actually very relevant in Vintage because if you have Bolas's Citadel and Necropotence, it's like having Sensi's Divining Top.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you could clear the top card of your deck if you could see the top card of your deck and manipulate it in some way. Great call out. This all has to happen at once. And this is card draw, which means Orcish Bowmaster, Hullbreacher, Narset, all those things affect it where they don't affect Necropotence. Your maximum hand size is 5 instead of 7. You have fewer resources to work with. That's pretty straight up. That is a straight up nerf over Necropotence. And Necropotence is if you would discard a card, exile it. And that, I believe it's also, is it a trigger? Is the card ever in your graveyard or is it a replacement effect?
I believe it's a trigger.
I think it is, yeah. So a card is briefly in your graveyard and then a trigger happens from Necropotence that exiles it. This is if any card or token is put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile instead. So this is a much harsher of the Void style effect. And it's interesting that they called out tokens because this is a little advanced loophole that a lot of people don't even know is the case. Like Dredge sometimes brings in Leyline of the Void to stop creature decks from killing their bridges by killing their own creatures. But if a creature token dies, the bridges are still removed, because Leyline of the Void stops cards from going to the graveyard. A token still does. I don't know why they felt they needed to call this out in the rules text of this card specifically, but there must be a reason, and I'm really interested to find out what it is. But cards or tokens straight up exiled.
I would quickly like to give a shout out to a new supporter of our podcast, the Eternal Durdles. On their podcast, for years they've been saying that Necropotence should be unbanned. I don't agree. I think Necropotence would actually be too strong for Legacy. However, they did give us Necrodominance, and a card that is traditionally seen in a lot of meme decks in Legacy, like Belcher-esque decks, would be Leyline of Anticipation. And that's a card that would work really well with Necrodominance, because on the end step, you'll pay 18, 19 life, you'll have those cards in your hand, and now you can play that at instant speed. You could do the same thing with Born Upon a Wind, which is a 1 and a blue. For an instant, you can play cards at instant speed, draw a card. So you theoretically have 8 of these blue effects now that let you go off on your own end step after drawing cards with Necrodominance, so you could ignore the limited hand size of 5 claws of the card. There's a lot of people brewing around this card right now. It's really exciting. And then there's a lot of content being made about Necrodominance. A lot of people are out there saying this card is going to be banned pretty quickly. Guys, out of the 3 of us, I'm probably the one who plays the most terrible combo decks. I actually have a much lower opinion of this card. I think it's going to be decent. However, the decks that people are building right now are very all-in, and there's some friction because if you're like, okay, if people are building all-in, what happens once they just start adding Force of Will and Daze and it becomes a little bit more realistic instead of a deck like Oops All Spells? But there's a natural friction there because you're a deck that wants to pay life. So if you Necropotence for, I don't know, 18 life, all of a sudden you can't Force of Will. So if your opponent decides to wait until after the trigger, they can get you on the end step. You won't be able to draw cards for the rest of the game, and then they can just kill you with attacking with a creature or something. So Necropotence, that life clause does end up mattering. So people are like, okay, well, I'll play Pact of Negation. All of a sudden, you're a lot more all in, and you're easier to disrupt. So that is what I'm finding so far. And people are playtesting this card with, proxies or playtest cards. But I think that another aspect of this card, which Brian mentioned, is that cards that go to the graveyard from anywhere would be exiled. The best Legacy combo decks right now all play Echo of Aeons because they allow you to mulligan aggressively. And you can't play Echo of Aeons with Necrodominance. So you end up in a situation like a lot of the pre-existing Storm decks. But I mean, Black Saga Storm before the Bowmaster versions did not play Echo. But when you looked at that deck or Ant, they need a lot of physical cardboard in order to win, and it's tough to do that when you're not playing Echo of Aeons because you have to keep riskier 5s and 6 card hands. So now you're a deck that can't mulligan well either, and there's a lot of restrictions with Necrodominance. I actually think, unlike Vexing Bauble, this deck was brilliantly designed, and it was clear that they put a lot of thought and care into this card, and I think it's just a beautiful design. And I'll quit grandstanding now, but I just word vomited. I'll give up the mic.
Orcish Bowmasters is 40% of the format. This draws cards and costs life. I am not very scared of this card. I expect that it is a legacy playable card. I don't think this is the next Underworld Breach that is going to snap the format in half.
Quick pause there, Phil. If you flash in a Orcish Bowmasters in response to the trigger, you now get to, because it's not like I get to the end step and I go, okay, I'll pay 5 life. And you're like, okay, flash in Bowmaster. That's not how this works. Once I announce a total, you cannot flash in Bowmaster.
I actually think that's not correct. I was just reading the card just now, trying to figure this out myself. These are separate sentences with an if you do in the middle. I think this works like Grist. Like you may sacrifice a creature, then if you do destroy target creature or planeswalker. I believe this is templated. Like it doesn't say at the beginning of your end step, pay any amount of life and draw that many cards. There is an if you do. There's a period if you do. I think you have to commit here.
Okay, well, people in the Storm Discord have been saying that there's no ability to respond there.
So this is really important. We are trying to get this out when it's hot and fresh, but generally the rules FAQ to a set comes out when it's fully spoiled around pre-release, and that's when we can finally be certain how all these things work. But I have Grist the Hunger tied up. -2, you may sacrifice a creature, period. When you do, destroy target creature or planeswalker. I know that is an activated ability that then creates a second triggered ability, and you can respond in between. And that's exactly how Necrodominance is written.
No, it's if versus when. The when is creating a separate trigger. The if is not, right?
Does it? I don't know. Maybe.
Because triggers are when, whenever, at, right? And if is not a trigger.
Maybe. But it still asks if you did that. Like, why isn't this written as like pay X life and draw that many cards? At the beginning of your end step, you may pay any amount of life and draw that many cards. Why is it 2 sentences with an if you do in the middle? We're live right now, and that's fine because this is going to be an important distinction. And if it's confusing us, it is likely to be confusing.
While these two do their homework, I'd like to make another point. So hypothetically, we'll worry about the Bowmaster thing later, but let's say you pay 18 cards with an Orcish Bowmaster in play. You could still draw into Born Upon a Wind after you've sacrificed your Lion's Eye Diamond for triple blue, and then you'll respond with Born Upon a Wind to the Orcish Bowmaster triggers that deal damage whenever you draw cards, and then eventually you'll put a Tendrils of Agony on the stack, targeting your opponent with roughly 20 Orcish Bowmaster triggers on the stack, and you go, haha, Phil, none of those resolve. That's at least what I would do in a video. And then Phil's Orcish Bowmasters will disappear as his life total becomes 0.
Okay, that's a fair point.
I think you're right. If is not when, and I'm now reading the text of Academy Rector, which has a trigger when it dies, and when that trigger resolves. So Academy Rector is when it's put in a graveyard for play, you may remove it from the game, period. If you do, search your library for an enchantment. There's definitely not a spot to respond once you've removed it from the game. I think you guys are right. I created confusion for no reason. Yeah, this is if you do, not when you do. Good call out, Phil.
I'm going to write about this in my diary.
I mean, go ahead. Like, I don't mind trying to figure out new cards on the fly. It's all good. I just want to make sure we cover the information.
I mean, people are going to enjoy this. It's fine.
Yeah, whatever.
Going back to the point, I believe that the number must be set after the Bowmaster enters play. So, like, if you are just doing a Necrodominance for value and then Phil flashes in an Orcish Bowmasters, you're like, okay, I'll pay 5 life instead, and then I'll just gear up for next turn or whatever. So you're going to have a little bit more information than people expect with this card.
Yes. Now that we have figured that out for sure. Yes, you get to know if there's a Bowmaster or an Narset or a Hull Breacher in play before you pay any life into this, and then you can adjust accordingly.
Why don't we do the next card?
Real quick on Necrodominance. We haven't talked about it yet. We only talked about it in Storm or a combo. But what about Pox? Like, I play a lot of Pox, like more than is normal. And frequently you just kind of like hit 3 mana and then you run out of cards. I would pay 6 to refill in a Pox deck. Hit my next couple of land drops, get a few more edicts. That's cool. Even like the old Lower Potence deck, the one that Randy Bueller won the Pro Tour with, that deck had Drain Life and Order of the Ebon Hand in it. That was just a black deck trying to refill. I think there might be a home for Necrodominance in fringe archetypes using something like that, even if it doesn't end up being the full Necropotence for combo purposes that everyone thinks right now.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. I think it's Exsanguinator Cavalry. I think it is a black life linker that allows you to repeatedly use Necrodominance to refill. or maybe like a black Urza Saga deck that can fish out a Shadow Spear to do a similar thing. Like, I think you can use it in that mid-rangey aspect as well.
Right.
I don't know if it's better than just playing another card that kills your opponent, though.
Or even just like black, red, or nope, never mind. I was about to say black, red Reanimator, but then I remembered the bottom line. No, they would not use that to refill. All right. Yeah, they thought about this card pretty well. But yeah, Pox, I wouldn't miss my graveyard.
When this card was originally leaked or spoiled or whatever you'd like to call it, my mind actually didn't go to Storm. It went to Doomsday, because when you look at vintage Doomsday, Necropotence is the biggest home for that card. And in Legacy Doomsday, the toughest part is finding your Doomsdays because you only have 4 of them. And they're so strapped for broken things to cast off of Dark Ritual that they play Personal Tutor. And Necro Dominance, actually, when I first saw it spoiled, I was like, oh, this is just Doomsdays 5 through 8 that allow you to set up and move pretty quickly. I would not be surprised if the best home for this card ends up being in Legacy Doomsday and not Storm.
Yep, that would make sense to me. Okay, we've talked about this card a lot, which I think is fine because I think those are the 2 biggest ones. And now we're just sort of in the quick hits. We'll probably see these here and there section of the pod.
I think this next card we're definitely going to see, and I know that Phil's going to play it for sure. Shifting Woodland.
100%.
Yeah. So Shifting Woodland enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest. It taps for a green. And then if you have Delirium, which is 4 different card types, you may pay 2 green, so 4 mana total. Shifting Woodland becomes a copy of target permanent card in your graveyard until end of turn. Activate if there are only 4 more card types, aka what Delirium is. So Phil, let's say I happen to have, I don't know, a Dark Depths in my graveyard that I discarded a Mox Diamond. What happens if I want to copy it?
Yeah, I mean, this is another way to cheat a 2020 creature into play. You know, historically, we've seen a lot of Vampire Hexmage. We've seen Thespian Stage. Occasionally these decks will play other effects, and things that get value by using your graveyard tend to be good in Legacy. Even the less powerful ones, like Echoing Deeps, is a card that sees a decent amount of Legacy play in decks like Lands, for example. This is something that you can play in your Depths deck that taps for colored mana, will frequently but not always enter untapped, and it is target permanent, so it is not restricted to just like going and copying your 2020. You could use this to copy a giant monster as well. This is good, and a Legacy deck that is playing a bunch of land-oriented things is probably going to end up with 4 card types in its graveyard in the mid-game. Maybe not the early game, but the mid-game.
Yeah, copying any permanent is really exciting. This could just be Knight of the Reliquary that does something else for the turn. This has a lot of potential. 4 is a lot of mana, and we are talking about targeting a thing in your graveyard after getting Delirium. So this card is stressed by Graveyard Hate twice. Like proactive Graveyard Hate. If I just Nile Spellbomb you at some point, you might not even get Delirium again. And I could just wait till you sink 4 mana into this. Like it's exploitable, but on a land that taps for green, you don't need much out of that to make it clear the bar.
The interesting thing here is that this doesn't have a sorcery speed restriction or anything. So there's hypotheticals where like, oh, I have this land sitting in play. Oh, you used your Abrupt Decay on my hate piece. You start to combo off. Boop. My Shifting Woodland is that combo piece until end of turn. This is probably going to get some people with some very strange things from time to time.
Well, also, Phil, the land stack can look a lot more innocent now. Like if they pass with 5 open mana, and they can just go, okay, end step crop rotation, get the Shifting Woodland Mirage without having either of the Dark Depths combo pieces in play, like Thespian Stage or Dark Depths or anything. Like they can look a lot more innocent and then just get you, which I think is a pretty big upgrade as well. Phil, what if this land became an island though, using, I don't know, Harbinger of the Seas?
Man, I historically hate merfolk. They are just the worst creature type in all of Magic. And then they print this, and I like this card.
Harbinger of the Seas. 1 blue for a creature merfolk wizard. It's a 2/2. Non-basic lands are islands, so it's kind of like a Magus of the Moon, but for islands.
Magus of the Bloon.
Exactly, but a big difference. 1 blue and not 2 blue. Phil, after Ancient Tombs.
Absolutely. No, I think that mana cost change probably makes it so that this does not see play in the Stompy archetypes very often. Like, this is absolutely amazing in a Merfolk deck where this is simultaneously mana denial for your opponents and something that enables your island walk off of your various lords. This card is very good. Merfolk is not an archetype that I tend to be excited to play. But if you are a Merfolk deck that has a like, oops, I win button on 3 mana against a lot of the 4 to 5 color greedy decks of the format that can come in at instant speed off of Vial or uncounterably via Cavern of Souls, that is pretty exciting.
Yep.
I also think that this gives blue decks a strong sideboard option for times when Blood Moon or Back to Basics maybe don't make sense for one reason or another.
Yeah, this doesn't solve the primary problem with Back to Basics, which is Red Blast, but this does dodge Boseiju, which gets both Blood Moon and Back to Basics, and it's frequently played in the decks where you would want Blood Moon or Back to Basics, like those land-based strategies, the ones that might play Shifting Woodland that we just talked about. I don't know how many Harbinger of the Seas I'm just going to have in my Bant control sideboards moving forward, but this is a very powerful Magic card, whether you're using Merfolk's energies or not.
So the next one that's here might break Pauper, just full disclosure up front. It is Cranial Ram. For a black and a red, you get a living weapon, which is the thing where it comes attached with a germ token. Equipped creature gets +X+1, where X is the number of artifacts you control, and it has equip cost 2. So I want you to think about the average Pauper game where all of your opponent's lands are artifact lands. And I want you to think how big this is going to be. It starts with a body and then can be re-equipped from there. This is a very, very, very powerful effect.
Right. And Rakdos just happens to be the artifact colors anyway. In Thoughtcast is legal in Pauper. Sometimes these decks skew to Grixis, but Rakdos is the colors of Experimental Synthesizer, Deadly Dispute, Reckoner's Bargain. A lot of this stuff that is happening in the format anyway is just in these colors. Disciple of the Vault's legal, right?
It is banned.
Oh, did they ban it? Okay, never mind. All right, so Disciple of the Vault is banned. Atog is banned. In our last episode, we mentioned Gavin Verhey talked about in his Pauper update that there is a card coming out in MH3 that's probably going to need to be banned, and they are aware of it. This is what he was talking about. He has confirmed on Twitter this is the card. And he posted a kind of interesting Twitter poll, which is, what should we do when we know a card's busted? Do you want to play with it for a little while? How long should we wait? Should we just pre-ban it? What do people think about this? I think pre-banning, personally, I think pre-banning's kind of whack. But also, give it a very short leash.
So this goes back to my point from earlier on in the episode of printing a card for the limited format. You know that this card is going to be a problem in Pauper. Cranial Planing is banned. They just banned all that glitters. Welcome, Cranial Ram. And I don't think that being two different colors of mana, like if you compare it to Cranial Plating, being black-red is very different from 2 generic. And then equipping for 1 instead of 2 obviously matters. Like, you can't equip at instant speed. I understand that there's differences, but we keep on proving that the affinity deck is a problem. And then they just print another card that pushes affinity over the top. So limited format versus long-term sustainability, they're going to have to take action at some point.
There has also been a lot of buzz, including by Gavin himself, about the artifact lands, and maybe those are banned targets. Like, it's the old Mishra's Workshop versus every artifact in Vintage conversation, and there's a lot of restricted artifacts in Vintage, thanks to Mishra's Workshop, that you can still play 4 of. I think that banning the bridges and making people play with the original shitty 1 mana, completely destructible artifact lands, if they want to enable this sort of stuff and get obliterated by Mox Monkeys and Shatters. Maybe a Cranial Ram lands in a space where it's uncastable or not that big if you can cast it. Maybe it's busted no matter what you do. But there's further machinations happening on the Pauper panel than just, obviously, this card's busted. Maybe they cut out the bridges and let this ride for a while. Either way, your point stands, though, that it does suck that this thing is a known problem, but has to be in for limited.
When MH3 drops and we have full access to it, My first league I record will probably be with Cranial Ram to ensure that I get a video with it and that I get to experience this brokenness before it's gone.
Good call.
Brian, this next card I think has your name all over it.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. Buckle up, there's a lot of words. This is Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student. She is a 1 mana, a single blue, legendary creature - moonfolk wizard, a 0/3 flying. Whenever Tamiyo attacks, investigate, that is, make a clue. And when you draw your 3rd card in a turn, exile Tamiyo and return her to the battlefield transformed. And the back is Tamiyo, Seasoned Scholar, legendary Tamiyo Planeswalker, starts at 2 loyalty, +2 until your next turn. Whenever a creature attacks you or a Planeswalker you control, it gets -1, -0 till end of turn. -3, so important that can't happen until you plus her at least once. -3, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. If it's a green card, add 1 mana of any color. And -7, draw cards equal to half the number of cards in your library rounded up. You get an emblem with you have no maximum hand size. So all these abilities are pretty medium, but this is a 1 mana Planeswalker that immediately flips off of a single Brainstorm. Obviously the text of this card is attack 3 times, investigate 3 times, crack 2 clue, or I guess it would be 2 because you get a turn. This would flip somewhere around turn 4 if you turn 1 in a normal game of Magic with nothing else going on. But I mean, Modern's got Preordained, Serum Visions, Consider, all these things too. And then Legacy, you get Brainstorm, which just does it. That's just 3 at once. And getting a Planeswalker starting to plus as early as turn 2 could be pretty powerful.
The +2 ability is just the first line on Jace Architecture of Thought, I believe it is. The one from Return to Ravnica that was standard playable for a very long time. I might be butchering the name.
The 4 mana one.
Yeah. So something that I thought when I first saw these transform cards is I thought they were all fakes. Because there's a subtle difference in this set compared to every other set with transform cards or flip cards, which is that the set symbol is not on the back for the very first time. And I was just like, oh, that's easy. It's a fake. There's no set symbol. And somebody's like, what? And they started looking at it. Sure enough, this is the first set where they didn't put the logo on the back. And I think that's just wild. Aesthetically, I don't hate it. But from always seeing it, it's just so weird that it's not there.
That's interesting. I didn't notice that. And I probably never would if you didn't point it out.
I'm sort of skeptical about this one. I want to see it in action, but it feels like the clue portion of this on the front side is not particularly strong. And I like to evaluate cards based on the floor. And the floor of this is a 0/3 flying body that requires 2 mana for me to draw a card.
After a successful combat step.
Yeah. I'm very skeptical of this one. I am very willing to be wrong, but this doesn't look super playable to me.
I mean, I honestly don't think so either. I just think that the ability to flip this Planeswalker off of a single Brainstorm is extremely tempting. But I think they knew that because the abilities on this thing aren't that good. Whenever a creature attacks you or Planeswalker, it's -1, -0. Who cares? Like, this stops the tokens off a Goblin Rabblemaster, but the Rabblemaster itself is still cracking for a zillion. Stops Orcish Bowmaster, but maybe not the Orc army. And then you have to plus once before you can get card advantage off of it, which is return target instant or sorcery. And the if it's a green, add 1 color thing, that all of this cycle, they're all monocolor on the front, but then they call out a second color on the back. That's kind of how they get the pseudo gold card. And it is a Simic Planeswalker on the back. The color identity is blue and green. So there's a lot going on here, but other than a pretty easy to turn on Planeswalker, and forget about Brainstorm for a second. Even if you turn 1 Tamiyo, turn 2, draw for turn, ponder, now you have a Planeswalker, ponder, preordain, whatever. It is very easy to flip this. Even in Modern, if you just play a density of cantrips, just preordain, consider. She's a Planeswalker on turn 2. And I'm sure they balanced around that because they would have... There's no way they're just like, oh no, we forgot about cantrips. They knew what they were doing. And it's very intentionally weak on the back.
I'm just going to say, is this the Modern Horizons 2 card Ragavan that we were just so painfully wrong about?
I don't think this is Ragavan by any universe. I love that its stats block Ragavan in Modern, where it's intended to function. That rules. But no, I don't know. I will play with this card. Probably won't be impressed by it, is my bet.
I'm more excited about Grist Voracious Larva than this one.
You want to read and talk about that card, since you brought it up?
Yeah. All right. So this is 1 green for a legendary creature insect with Death Touch. It's a 1/2. Whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, you could play a green. If you do, you exile this transformed into Grist the Plague Swarm, 3 starting loyalty, +1, make a 1/1 black and green insect token, then mill 2 cards. It gets a Death Touch counter if you mill a black card. For -2, you can destroy an artifact or enchantment. And for -6, for each creature card in your graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1 black and green insect.
Yeah, this is a lot harder to flip, but the plus impacts the board immediately, and the minus also impacts the board immediately. Like, disenchant's fine, but I mean, yeah, we'll see. Another thing that we have to mention out of due diligence is a lot of these cards we're reading, including the next one we're going to read, are legendary creatures, and we are the Caracas format. That doesn't matter in Modern, and it's upside in formats like EDH, but Legacy is the most powerful place where the most likely place you'll find a Caracas just in the wild. And doing all this work to have your idiot bounce before it can flip is pretty tough. Phil, would you like to read us a 3-mana legendary creature now?
Yes, so we are now going to have 6. That is the name of the card, as in Ren and 6.
We're going to have what?
How many?
We are going to have 6, Brian, and it is going to be wonderful.
Oh, yikes. I need HR.
Turns out we're a small company and we don't have an HR thing. You can actually just talk to Bryant's wife about it. And, she can consult with Thalia Karn, the great creator, about any of your concerns.
She does work in regulation.
Yeah, Bryant's 1-year-old daughter is our HR department. All right, how about you tell me about this 6 we're going to have?
All right, 2 colorless and a green for a 2/4 with reach. It's a tree folk, legendary creature. When it attacks, mill 3. You can put a land card into your hand if you mill 1. As long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have retrace. So this is the next in this like pseudo cycle of cards that mess with the graveyard and give you some land-oriented value. Free Strider Lookout was another one recently that kind of operated in this same general sort of space. I think this one is much stronger than that. You get to fill up your graveyard quickly, which often matters. You get a land card, that matters. And this gives the non-land permanents in your graveyard retrace. So meaning that if you are playing this alongside all sorts of maybe value-oriented mid-range creatures, your Knight of the Reliquaries, your Fiend Artisans, and things like that, this is a way to fish those out of the graveyard.
It seems like a very fair card. I've had a lot of people commenting on my YouTube channel like, Brian, can't wait to see what you do with 6. And I'm just like, are we reading the same card? There's like nothing degenerate about this card. Like, it is a good, fair card. I'm not saying anything bad about it, but I'm just a little skeptical that it's going to be broken. Like, I've seen very few times that someone has ultimated Ren in 6, then I'm like, oh, wait until I see what I do now. It's usually just like, all right, I'll retrace Ponder, I'll double Lightning Bolt you, untap, or whatever. It's never anything combo-esque.
Yeah, you can Green Sun Zenith for this, but you'd have to be in a spot where getting 6 makes more sense than getting Knight of the Reliquary or Ramineb Excavator, which both have the same mana value as far as Green Sun Zenith is concerned. And neither of those are legendary, so Rogue Caracases won't just brick your 3-drop. I can see this getting some love in green-red CEDH decks with Dockside Extortionist and Underworld Breach. Just getting to refire those is pretty busted, but I don't know. I don't really see this taking over Legacy, or Modern for that matter.
Certainly not. All right, the next one is Amped Raptor. It's 1 and a red for a 2/1 first striking dinosaur. When it ETBs, you get 2 energy. Then if you cast it from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You can cast that card by paying an amount of energy equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost.
This card reads like it has Cascade, but it's very different in some important ways. The cards it doesn't gate based on mana value or how much energy you have. Like, you might just flip a 3-drop right away and you only have the 2 energy, so you just get nothing. And the cards that you don't cast don't go back on the bottom of your deck. It is just exile until you hit a non-land, and then you may cast the non-land. So if you're thinking about like, we just cut a mana off of Living End or Rhinos here, if you're willing to exile 25 cards of your deck to hit one, maybe, except that doesn't even work. Like, your deck would have to be all lands and those, or more raptors, and you can't even raptor into raptor because it specifically says if you cast it from your hand. That also means you can't cascade into it and then keep the chain going. I think this card sucks ass.
Yup.
Ooh, I have seen a lot of hype on Twitter from people playing the younger formats that are super excited about this card. You think this one's a stinker?
Have they read it?
Phil, I hate to tell you this as a teacher, but a large percentage of people are illiterate.
Yeah, like this card falls into the space of, it looks like a different thing, but if you actually do read the words on it, it is extremely different than that thing in many ways that are all bad for the thing. Yeah, like the idea of just like jamming this on turn 2, exiling like 2 lands and a 3-drop, you can't play the 3-drop, and then like those cards are gone, then you just have a 2-1 first strike and play. I don't know, like this is full random. You can't set it up like a Cascade deck. You can't do anything with this. The best thing you could do is have a bunch of energy in your pool, and this is just a 2-for-1 when you cast it. Like, if you have a bunch of energy, if you've been doing like, if you've been puzzle knotting or whatever it is, there's a lot of energy support in this set. This might end up being like fine to do, but if you just have 6 energy in your pool, spend 2 mana, get this plus a 5-drop, like, cool, that's a good exchange. But you can't just play this card on turn 2 and hope to get paid. Maybe some like super lean zoo deck where the curve stops at 2 and you always hit with Amteraptor, but I don't know. I'm not a believer. It's certainly not a combo enabler.
Gentlemen, there's 2 land cycles that I would like to talk about in this set, really 3. 1, onslaught fetches are being reprinted, and I don't think that we should forget to mention that. Like, driving down the cost to enter Legacy is such a huge factor, and I understand you might not want to play with reprints of the original fetch lands, but if you're able to get Modern Horizons 3 polluted deltas for $8, maybe that will change your mind. So keep in mind, onslaught fetches are now available once again as reprints. The next one that I would like to talk about is the MDFCs. If we go all the way back to, I believe, Zendikar Rising, we saw a cycle of rare ones that had a spell on the front that you could cast, and then on the back, there was a land where if you wanted to enter untapped, it would lightning bolt you. Well, we have those again, except this time, at least in my opinion, the spells are way more playable.
Yeah, I am very excited about Witch Enchanter in particular. So on the front, it's a essentially 4-mana disenchant on the creature, and on the back, it's one of the pay 3 life lands. That is an incredible upgrade for Legacy and Vintage initiative decks that want to be playing like the Chrome Mox and Solitude type pitch cards. You just get to pitch this card, or play it as a land, or play it as a disenchant. Like, this card is sweet. This cycle is awesome.
There's also Boggart Trawler. For 2 and a black, you get a 3/1 goblin. When it enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard. There's also one that is, I believe, I don't have it up on my scry file, I apologize, but I believe it's 2 black for an instant, destroy target planeswalker or creature, and then flips onto the back for a untapped land.
Yeah, those are all really good.
Much better than Agadeem's Awakening or whatever.
Every time I play with Agadeem's Awakening, I get into the mid game with my combo deck where I'm not supposed to be, and I'm like, is there anything to recur with this? And there never is. That's just my personal anecdote about Agadeem's Awakening.
Additionally, there's also a set of dual lands this time. All of the ones previously back to Zendikar Rising were always single color. Well, now the ones that always enter the battlefield tap for 1 of 2 colors. So they don't have the 3 mana clause, but you do get, you know, a dual land or whatever lands that you would like to call them from Invasion Block, where they have no land types but enter the battlefield tapped. And I think that's pretty exciting for formats like Modern or whatever.
Yep, and those are better to put under a Chrome Mox because they are the 2 colors on the front, and then they're a dual land on the back. There's a lot to like about those.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think Chrome Mox decks and Oops All Spell decks are going to benefit a lot from these new cycles of lands.
Concur.
Now let's Nethergoyf.
You know what deck is going to get a lot better, Phil? I think Delver decks with Nethergoyf.
All right, here's Nethergoyf. Single black mana for a Lurgoyf creature. It has star and 1+ star are its stats. and the power is equal to the number of card types among cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is that number +1, and then it has escape for 2 and a black, and exile any number of other cards from your graveyard with 4 or more types among them. So this is a Tarmogoyf that only checks your graveyard instead of all graveyards, for 1 mana instead of 2, and if it dies, you can basically exile Delirium to bring it back. This is a 1-drop that could get heckin' large, and it can come back later. It's likely to be smaller because you have to eat a bunch of card types to bring it back, temporarily at least, but it comes back. That's pretty good.
Mishra's Bobble Stonk's going up.
Recursive cards are good. Like, people non-ironically play Cling to Dust in Legacy, and that is not a particularly good Magic the Gathering card. But the fact that it has escape kind of pushes it over the edge. And Nethergoyf is a relatively strong Magic card the first time around. And the fact that if it doesn't eat exile-based removal, it's just going to come back later is quite strong. I think aggressive black decks, be that Delver decks or some sort of mono black deck, will like this effect. I think it is better in cantrip decks, though, because a mono black deck might have some trouble really getting to Delirium, especially multiple times.
The next card is White of the Reliquary. So for green and a black, you get a 2/2 Zombie Knight, has Vigilance. White of the Reliquary gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. Tap this creature, sacrifice another creature, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. When this card was spoiled, I had multiple friends that have sort of fallen out of Magic over the years that messaged me, and they're just like, new Knight of the Reliquary is even better. Can I play this in Modern? Like, is it good? Like, people are excited about this card, and I'm happy that it's bringing back people into the game that might have fallen out over the years when some of their more favorite decks fell out of favor. And I think that's kind of what you want. Like, I know that, Brian, we've talked in I believe the last episode about not loving cards like Serum Visionary because they feel a little bit tacky. This does not feel tacky at all. This is the correct kind of homage that you should be playing in a Modern Horizons 3 type set to me.
Yes, I like this card, and I like the homage they paid to it. I also like that the flavor text, her new demonic overlords prized her knowledge of Vance landscape. This is the Knight of the Reliquary, and she is a zombie now. This isn't just like a different thing that's on Bant now. But yeah, I think that's super badass. And yeah, this card, as far as playability, gives big Fiend Artisan vibes, kind of like an Inside Out Fiend Artisan. I don't know where this is going to layer in. I haven't done any thinking about deck building with this yet, not seriously, but like Fiend Artisan rewards your creatures with more creatures. Knight of the Reliquary rewards your lands with more lands, and White of the Reliquary rewards your creatures with lands. So where the intersection is on those to be determined, but it is certainly another piece of this puzzle.
I think the most exciting word on this card is Vigilance. So this thing gets to attack with however big of a body it currently has, and then has the ability to sacrifice a creature, maybe mid-combat, maybe in response to an opponent doing something, to fish up a utility land. So you just get the ability to go and like, oh, I am going to attack, but I am still like holding up a Bojuka Bog.
Yeah, agreed. Let's jump into the next ones. This is the Flare cycle. There's one of each color, and you can circumvent each of their mana costs by sacrificing a non-token creature of the spell's color. Flare of Denial is counter target spell, and Flare of Duplication is copy target instant or sorcery. You may choose new targets for the copy. And this is a cycle, but those are the best two. The black one's like an edict, and it's 1 red for the duplication, 1 blue for the counterspell. I don't know how I feel about these. Non-token creatures aren't exactly in high supply in most Magic games. Like, if I've spent the effort to cast a Delver of Secrets, I'm not trying to sack it to counter your spell for free when I already have Daze and Force of Will available to me. The Flare of Duplication makes a lot of sense in CEDH Rograk decks, where you actually have a 0 mana red creature that you just have access to every game for freezies.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, shout out Rog Brain. These are obviously powerful. You have to respect any free spell, potentially free spell, but enabling these is harder than most free spells we've seen before. We ready to talk about Nadu? Do you guys have any thoughts about the flare cycle? Or are we into Birdland?
Nah, we're into Birdland. I wanted to talk about this one.
This thing is sweet.
So this is Nadu, Winged Wisdom. 1 colorless, and then Simic, legendary creature, bird, wizard. What's not to love? Great art, too. It is a 3/4 flyer with creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability triggers only twice each turn. So the thing that I didn't understand when I first saw this card is that it says creatures you control have. So each creature you control has the ability to trigger this twice each turn, which means that if you have something like a Shuko that has a 0 equip cost, you can just churn through all of the various creatures that you have and repeatedly draw cards each turn. And this has the potential to go infinite as well if you start getting into something like a Skewt Swarm.
Yeah, like something like Shuko or Lightning Greaves or Nomad's Encore that could just kind of target in an unbound sense or for free. You get to draw 2 cards per creature per turn, and the lands come into play, and it also doesn't say tapped. So if you're churning like 4 cards a turn and you flip 2 lands and 2 spells, there's a good chance you could just cast the spell you just found off of the lands you just put into play. I don't know what it would take for the critical mass for this to pop off. In Legacy, we're competing with Karakas, we're competing with Red Blast. It is a 3/4 though, so it survives Lightning Bolt. Also, it says put it into your hand, not draw. So we're not dealing with Bowmasters here. This is a lot of juice on a pretty solid, respectable body, just straight up. So I have my eye on this one in a variety of formats.
The next card here does not have an officially translated name yet. It is the uncommon Eldrazi drone creature. So it is a 2/2. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn token. With sacrifice this creature, add 1 colorless mana. Whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this card absolutely fucks. Every one of your 0-cost spells that you play now gives you a mana. Every one of your 0-cost spells that you play now deals 1 damage to your opponent. This card feels like it has incredible combo potential, incredible reach potential, very good with your Mystic Forge type cards, very scary with a draw 7 effect that just lets you refuel. I expect Legacy decks to be built around this card.
Yeah, Phil, I'm not happy about it, but this does seem like a card designed perfectly for the Karnforge type decks. I plan on recording with it at some point. It's just colorless Birgi God of Storytelling, except instead of having a back, it's a win condition, and I think that's just great.
Yep, natural fit for any of those Ancient Tomb style decks that are just trying to dump cards out. This is also a win condition in Bomberman. You don't have to find Pirate Spell Bomb anymore. It's just every time you loop your LED, you ping them for 1. So there's a lot of spots where this could just pop right in.
All right, the next one is a land, Arch of Innovation. Taps for a blue. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island. And for a blue and tap, the next spell that you cast this turn has Improvise. I think this card sucks, but I have seen a lot of people excited about it.
You know, Phil, I've been told that it's the new Tolarian Academy, which is why I put it in the show notes, because I'll be honest with you.
Holy shit.
I don't think this card is even close to Tolarian Academy, but people out there having strong takes, strong takes on this card.
So I play a shit ton of like Ancient Tomb artifact decks. And so many of these decks, their mana base starts with like 4 Ancient Tomb, 4 Urza Saga, 4 Seed of the Synod. The island restriction on this card is very difficult to meet. A lot of times, like these blue artifact decks might have like 2 actual factual islands. Like you're also competing with Otawara. I am not excited to put this card in a Legacy deck.
And Improvise only reduces by colorless mana when you tap an artifact. So you have to be casting spells with some large colorless mana requirement while you have a large number of artifacts at play. Because, like, if I were to pay blue and tap this to give Urza Improvise, the blue and the tap are the 2 mana I would save by doing that. So what spell are we casting here? And it's only the next spell.
Thought Monitor?
I mean, that already has affinity. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, it's not spells you cast this turn have Improvise. I could, if that was the words, I could see, like, you know, set up a big turn where you Karn Lattice all at once from 3 lands or whatever, but that's not what the card says. Yeah,
Maybe like a Coveted Jewel, because those decks are blue and they want to play Jewel. But the thing about that is all of the artifacts in that deck usually tap for mana anyway. So why would you tap them for this?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not creative, but I don't see it. It's definitely not fucking Tolarian Academy, you maniacs. Settle down.
Why don't we breeze back past these last 2 ones and call it an episode? Psychic Frog. For 1 blue, 1 black, so 2 mana total, you get a creature frog that's a 1/2. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card, discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Psychic Frog, exile 3 cards from your graveyard. Psychic Frog gains flying until end of turn. So it's a nod to an old fan favorite, Psychotog, which I have an artwork printing on my wall because I love that card. This is an Odyssey All-Star. This is a nice nod to that, except it sort of has the John Finkel, whenever it deals damage, draw a card tacked onto it, except now it's Planeswalker 2. When you discard a card, it gets a counter instead of just +1/+1 until end of turn. This is a nice card to be added to Modern. I'm a little skeptical that it will see play. It's super cool. I just don't know if it passes the bar in today's age. What do you two think about it?
So it does have one really important thing on it that is kind of incidental to everything else that's going on, which it has the text discard a card : unbound discard outlets, like even like Lotleth Troll I see occasionally pop up in Pioneer or Modern. Something like Putrid Imp still enables some legacy strategies. I don't know if Grixis Madness with Vengevines and Rootwallas is going to be a thing we see. Dredge, just discarding a card on purpose, going into combat, dredging that card back up. Maybe it's a pivot there. I don't know. Maybe those are all too weak. Maybe 2 mana is a deal breaker on all those. But I think more than the Ophidian and the it gets bigger and sometimes it flies, as far as Eternal formats go, we should be looking at what does this discard a card unbound ability do for us?
Yeah, I wonder if you ever do any sort of weird dredge stuff with it where like you play it fairly as a way to get your dredgers into the graveyard, then like this attacks, you deal combat damage, you dredge instead of drawing. I don't know. I am skeptical, but there's a lot of possibility here.
There's also, they're doing more and more printings these days of cards like Insidious Roots and Willowgeist that trigger when cards leave your graveyard. So there might be some like Sultai value engine kind of thing. Maybe it has a dredge theme. Maybe it's an Asmo food deck. Maybe you're discarding your Oval Chase Daredevil and just picking it back up for freezies. I don't know, but this is just kind of a fun card, a throwback. I wish it was a Frog-Atog, though. I wish they would have given the Atog fans that much. Just making it a full frog kind of sucks. Give us Atogs back. Gremlins are trash. We want Atogs.
All right. The last one that we're going to talk about here is Felia Exuberant Shepherd. So this is 1 and a white for a 2/2 legendary dog creature with flash. When it attacks, exile up to 1 other target non-land permanent. At the beginning of the next end step, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If it entered under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Felia.
Phil, did you only add this because it's a corgi?
It is such a good boy.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I think this is a very real card. Like, I am going to be buying this card for EDH purposes, but I think this is going to see real legacy play in some fringe decks. Like, if you are someone who likes to dirtle with decks like Espervile and you want to reuse ETB creatures, this is a very powerful way to do that because it, unlike something like Soul Herder, it comes down earlier. It has the flexibility to just like, attack, blink your Urza Saga token out of existence. Attack, blink your Murktide Regent. It has lost its counters. This is an incredibly flexible card.
I would just like to point out, back in my day, a grizzly bear, one of the most dangerous animals on the planet, was a 2/2. And now all of a sudden we're seeing corgis be a 2/2. Like, I can definitely take a corgi. I can't take a grizzly bear. I'm just going to throw that out there. Like, if a corgi attacked me, I'd probably win. I'm getting mauled to death by a grizzly bear.
Yep, I think the flavor of this, though, is that the defending creature thinks the Corgi is so adorable that it just gets out of the way. But yeah, this card, I'm really glad it doesn't say when this enters the battlefield or attacks, or I think it would be truly busto. It is a 2/2 that has to get into the red zone before it does anything, and it has to flicker one of your creatures before it starts to draw. This is small and fragile, but on an uncontested board, jumping in the end step, suddenly looping something, a recruiter of the guard, like shit, that becomes pretty crazy if you don't answer it right away. But it does die to a Stiff Breeze, and once again, Caracasable, which in the decks that might play this might be an upside because you get to attack, then save it, just slurp it out of combat after it's done its thing. So yeah, I could see this showing up here and there. And you can tutor it with Recruiter of the Guard, which is also now in Modern. I don't think that was on our list earlier. Recruiter is in this set. So Modern Death and Taxes might be back on the menu, and we might see this doggo in Legacy.
Don't get my hopes up. Don't get my hopes up. I've been hurt before.
The final card for this episode, and by the way, we might have more next episode. We'll see how the spoiler season shakes out. But the final one for this episode is Power Balance, a nod to Counterbalance. And with Power Balance, it costs 2 red, so red. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may reveal the top card of your library. If you do, you may cast that card without paying its mana value if the 2 spells have the same mana value. So at first, people were talking about this in Commander because they're like, oh, it's just another Rhystic Study Mystical Remora effect. But when you think about how this card actually plays out in the decks that you want to play it in, and this goes across all formats in my opinion, a lot of the times the decks that would want to play this are doing something unique. So like, do you want to be playing counter spells on your opponent's turn when they do this? Maybe, but like then the 2 spells have to have the same mana value. What are the odds your counter spell costs the same as the spell they're playing? Or like, what does this like, if you wanted to play this, what does it look like? And the only answer that I've come up with is like a burn deck that wants to go long, but does that even make sense? So like, is this, if you're spending 2 mana on a spell, how much damage does this need to do to be worthwhile? And I can't come up with anything, but a lot of people are excited about this card.
I don't think they should be. Don't be fooled by familiar looking art and familiar looking name and haha, I'm in on the joke here. Counterbalance is busted, especially with Sensei's Top. Counterbalance just randomly revealing even just 1 out of every 3 spells, the way it tends to be played in Delver decks these days, even if you are just like, maybe you brainstorm to set up 1 counterspell once, already getting paid. If it hits something else after that, you're rich. This does what? Like, they bolt your Delver, you flip Delver and put another one in? Like, I don't know. That's not bad, but is it worth spending red to then introduce the RNG of making that happen? Or would you have rather just spent 2 mana on Murktide Region? I don't know. I'm not a believer in this. It seems really weird and unnecessary and unlikely to work.
All right. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Note that we did not talk about everything that's out there. This episode already ran long, so we skipped over some things like Null Elemental Blast, Brain Surge, White Orchid Phantom, Winter Moon. This is going to be a very powerful set shaking up your Eternal formats. So you'll be hearing more from us in the future about this set one way or another.